Public rhetoric in the U.S. has long assumed an association between poverty and vice. Some have held that poverty and the social structures that create it lead to personal vice. Others assert that vice leads to poverty. We believe the neurosciences shed new light on this old question. In his 1875 treatise, Vices Are Not Crimes, Lysander Spooner argues that, quote, poverty is the natural parent of nearly all ignorance, vice, crime, and misery there are in the world. One thinks of Oliver Twist, who participates in a life of crime and vice because of his impoverishment. For Spooner, poverty derives from social forces outside personal control, causes ignorance and indebtedness, destroys self-respect, and drives the poor to despair and drink. Others propose that vice leads to poverty. In our century, radio talk show host Bill Cunningham argues that poor people are not poor because they lack money. They are poor because they lack values, ethics, and morals. Cunningham focuses on black fathers and black mothers who, quote, act irresponsibly by producing children out of wedlock, unquote. If these parents were morally responsible, poverty might fade away. Humans appear to exaggerate the gap between rich and poor beyond simple biology, placing lower classes at physiological disadvantage. Other neuroscientists are actively attempting to elucidate the complex relationship between genetic variation and environmental factors such as maltreatment, abuse, or neglect. As an example, Avshalom Caspi and his colleagues have demonstrated intriguing correlations between genetic makeup and modulation of response to early life stress, suggesting a gene by environment interaction. They have identified that a functional polymorphism in the promoter region of the serotonin transporter gene influences the occurrence of depressive symptoms, clinical depression, and suicidality in persons exposed to early life stress. In stage 1, we will review and analyze the scientific literature around the relationship of poverty to vice and flourishing to virtue. In stage 2, we propose to critically analyze the key figures in Western virtue theory with regard to economics, body, and community. Cultural assumptions about poverty and vice and wealth and virtue have an august history. Classical virtue theory, beginning with Aristotle's highly classed account of virtue based on the model of the privileged Athenian, presumes an intricate unity between virtue and flourishing. In stage 3, the findings of the previous 2 stages come together to mutually critique and illuminate each other. Here we will not only reread contemporary accounts of virtue and vice in light of neuroscientific findings, but we will reread science in light of virtue theory. Yet virtue theory must inform neuroscience. For in our very recent past, certain biological ideas were wedded to certain social and political philosophies to the detriment of us all. Much of the science of the latter half of the 19th century made its way into governmental policy in the 20th century in the form of social Darwinism and its substantially more sinister offspring, eugenics. Thus, the final stage of research asks profound questions of public discourse and neuroscientific research and how each conceives of bodies and communities. We will explore the implications for moral formation in light of our frail and malleable neurobiological substrates. It seems that poverty does, in fact, affect brains. Thus, it seems important that notions of community with attendant communal structures and practices should be developed beyond the often default measures of economics. What are the implications for how we attend to the most vulnerable members of humanity? Could it be that none of us can truly flourish unless we all do? In other words, what sort of understanding of justice emerges from this project? Essential here will be the ways in which those, the most dependent and the most malleable of humans, children, are conceptualized. Our project is necessarily large, yet it is not a project of a single individual. We are a multidisciplinary team working on questions of the relationship of culture and society to science and politics and moral theory, questions born of neuroscientific investigation that necessitate multiple disciplines, because the bodies and communities upon which they bear cannot be reduced to genes and environment or to brains and stress.